Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are going to call this meeting to order now. It is 7 p.m. It is 7:06 p.m. on April 13, 2023, and this is a public meeting of the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission. My name is Victoria. I will be one of your facilitators today with Dr. Christine Moses. If the Spanish language interpreters, Ariel, can please give the information on the Spanish language interpretation?
Esta reunión es una reunión pública sujeta a la ley del Estado de Oregon y las normas administrativas de la ciudad de Portland y se grabará. Contamos con interpretación en español para esta reunión. Al acceder a interpretación en español, verá la transmisión de video de los oradores, pero la transmisión de audio será reemplazada por el intérprete. Para acceder a este servicio, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas, en los controles de la reunión de Zoom, en la parte inferior de su pantalla y seleccione Español.
Thank you. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Mary and Christine. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. The closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance, but please note that this is an automatic captioning services and is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon State Law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. As the commissioners are presenting or discussing things, if attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both that question and answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. Now I will pass it to the chair, one of the chairs of the commissioner, to do the land acknowledge.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Casey Lewis. I am one of the current co-chairs of the PAC for our current phase. I am use he, him pronouns. I'm very happy to be here with all of you this evening. We acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the Lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past and working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the Lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationship to these lands and waters. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Casey. Now we're gonna review our community agreements. These community agreements, it has 3 pages. And they are the Police Accountability Commission agrees to approach it works with honesty, openness, and willingness to work together to develop and achieve shared goals. The commission will work with each other, city, staff support, and external support to address issues as they arise, communicate openly, and meet each other's needs as part of working to meet the city's needs as a commission. All commission members, as well as city staff support and external support, will abide by these agreements as we perform the duties and mandates of the commission. As always, I'm gonna ask all the members to read through our community agreements, but I want to focus on 2 particular community agreements today. Number 1 is keep focus on the objectives of the meetings and individual agenda items. Otherwise, facilitators to note additional topics for discussion. And the second one is listen without agenda and refrain from interruptions. Now I will let everyone to read through the community agreements. Thank you. Next, please. If you notice that a conversation is coming close to violating a community agreement, please call your fellow commission members and gently and with compassion. If you are called in, please take a moment to consider how you can best participate on the space while still respecting the community agreements and making a space for everyone. Do we all commit to following the community agreements for today's meeting and to gently calling in our colleagues and collaborators if needed? And if you can show me your hands or thumbs up. Thank you very much. I will pass it over to the co-chairs to discuss the timeline.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Catherine McDowell, one of the co-chairs of the commission for this phase of work, which is our 4th phase of work. I use she, her pronouns. So we are, the 4th phase of work focuses on the structure and details of our work and of the new system. The future phases of work will focus on how the new system relates to the rest of city government and the transition plan from our current system to the new one. The commission's work plan extends now through August 31st, 2023, at which time we'll present our recommendations to the City Council for their consideration and approval. So this slide shows the outcome documents for the structure and details phase based on the agenda and scope approved by the commission. The full commission is approving areas of agreement as they come from the subcommittees, as well as certain definitions. Next slide, please. This slide is the current project plan for the structure and details phase of our work. It will be updated as needed as we go through the phase of the work, this phase of work, which we're well through at this point. The slide is for members of the public to understand basically how we get from now until the end of the phase. And we are now in really pretty late in the phase, as I said. We're in the blue box with the red border. So we are closing in on the end of this phase. So good work, everybody. On to the next slide. So just want to highlight some of the key meetings that are upcoming. We have a subcommittee meeting for the Oversight Staff Subcommittee on Monday. Then our next full commission meeting is a week from tonight, Thursday. Then following that, we have time reserved for an additional subcommittee meeting, most likely for board membership. And then you can see on our calendar that we have a few other meetings scheduled to try to wrap up this phase of work. Next slide, please. Okay, so for today's meeting, it includes a briefing with City Commissioner Renee Gonzalez. Welcome, Commissioner Gonzalez. We're pleased to have you here. Once we conclude that briefing, which I think is set to last until approximately 8 o'clock, we'll be turning to finish up our areas of agreement on reporting and transparency. Hopefully we'll get through that and be able to approve that document tonight. So that'll be our goal. Then we do have, of course, time for public comment and then some discussion, sort of our beginning discussion about our next phase of work. So that's what's ahead, and I'll turn it back to our facilitators. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. We're now going to take questions and let City Commissioner Gonzalez to respond to them. Please keep your question focused on the PAC works and brief. Please allow me to facilitate this Q&A. And please ask questions to help the Commission move developing recommendations on police accountability. Oh, sorry, you know what? I skipped, you're right, I skipped the part, sorry. Today's meeting agenda includes a briefing with City Commissioner Renee Gonzalez. It also includes time for the full commission to discuss the draft areas of agreements on reporting and transparency. This may include approving the document. There will also be time for public comments. Again, City Commissioner Gonzalez, we are very excited and happy and honored to get to know you better and to have you here. We really wanted, and we're waiting for this opportunity for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and we're very, very excited to be here. I also want to welcome again Grace. Welcome to our meeting. It's also an honor to have you here. And please, I will pass it to you, City Commissioner Gonzalez.
Well, thank you all so much for hosting me tonight, and thank you, Grace. She's on our team in City Hall and is connected to all things public safety oriented. I'll give you a general background and perspective on policing in the city at a high level, and then just really look forward to your questions. I am the Commissioner of Public Safety appointed to those bureaus in January after being elected in November. That includes the Fire Bureau, PAC, which is what you think of as 911, and Portland Bureau of Emergency Management, which is planning for big events, our most serious crisis, how to respond and plan for that. All told, it's about 1,000 public safety professionals in the city of Portland that are within our bureaus. A little more about my background. I've lived my entire professional career in the city of Portland after attending college and law school in the area. On my maternal side of the family, I'm a fifth generation Portlander. My father's side of the family were originally migrant workers in South Texas. and traveled throughout the country at different times to support their economic needs when things were tough. And I think both of those experiences shaped my perspective on policing in different ways. Knowing where you come from is a piece of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about my father's involvement in law enforcement and criminal justice in a second. But certainly from an early age, there's a perspective that there are difficult events with police at times, in particular populations of color. And they are also a lifeline for our most marginalized communities. They are both at the same time. And my father certainly experienced racism at different times in his youth, including at the hands of police. He also benefited from police interceding at different times in his life. And so I think, certainly the duality of the police function, that reality is shaped my view. He would go on to become a federal prosecutor and then a judge, and in those roles saw both police corruption that required prosecution, as well as large dependence on police for law enforcement and putting cases together. So again, sort of shapes multiple facets, perception of policing, seeing both the good, the bad, when it's effective, when it's not. As an adult and reflecting on where we are as a city of Portland for most of my adult life, the city of Portland has been an incredibly safe major city, at least relative to other cities in the country. Certainly the last 3 years, we've experienced, by Portland standards, very, very high crime rates. And I certainly view police as an essential component of addressing public safety in the community. And at the same time, fully recognize the calls for accountability and oversight. And frankly, the functioning of a free democracy, it is essential that we always have public oversight of the police function. So again, I view it with a duality. We are incredibly dependent on a functioning and well-supported police department to assure safety in our community. But anytime you entrust someone with the ability to utilize deadly force, anytime we hand someone a gun in a form of state-sanctioned violence at times, it requires true oversight and accountability for us to function. A couple of high-level pieces that I think are somewhat relevant to the discussion today, although I look forward to the specifics of the PAC. We are the last major city without body cams on our police officers. This is a tragedy. We are working very hard to remedy that as soon as possible. I think that is essential for us to have police accountability on the one hand, and also to protect police officers in the city to a certain extent against false claims made against police officers. It's required for both of those. I think we're very close. I think this wait is I think we're almost there, and I hope to have some announcements for you all in the coming weeks on that. I think that I think actually with that, I'm going to turn it over to your questions and just look forward to the dialogue tonight.
Thank you, City Commissioner Gonzalez. Now I'm going to the part that we all now take questions and let Commissioner Gonzalez respond to them. Please keep your questions focused on the PAC work and brief. Please allow me to facilitate this Q&A, and please ask questions that help the Commission move developing recommendations on police accountability. Is there a question for City Commissioner Gonzalez? Yes, Commissioner Casey, go ahead.
Thank you so much for being here this evening, Commissioner Gonzalez. Again, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Casey Lewis. I'm one of the co-chairs of the current phase. I think that something that's been on a lot of our minds is the fact that we are really trying to create something that is a best practice, a workable system, a system that's going to create and restore trust between the community and the police bureau. And at the same time, we know that what we build, what we create here is eventually going to be before the city council, who will make the ultimate decision about whether that is what they want to see the system look like. And so really my question for you is, when you have this proposal that we have before you, what are you really going to be looking for in terms of what you think, what you want this system to look like?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Casey. I think first and foremost, fidelity to what voters approved, as best we can interpret. That's, a cornerstone for any of these implementation projects. And it's, voters are often responding to a moment, to their best perception of the need of community at that particular time. So there's also this sort of, you guys have the hard work of taking the moment, what they voted for at a particular time, and then apply it in a slightly different context in which it was voted on. And you're trying to build something that's going to last and be, make systemic improvement. So I recognize that there can be a distance, and when there's a gap between when voters approve something and, when we actually implement it and try to create something that's going to last. But I still think that's your first and foremost, is that you've got to have fidelity to what voters approved. Secondarily, we have, as part of our onboarding for the city of Portland, I was also onboarded on the various commissions and committees touching police and oversight of police. And then you throw in the overlay of changes in state law with respect to how police operate, their own collective bargaining agreement, the DOJ settlement. And to be blunt, it's complex and often conflicting, these various pieces pulling in different directions. So I would just throw out that, in addition to fidelity to voters, that if we're can think about how these various pieces fit together in a rational way, in a way that, we can govern. That's not your primary charge. That's, but it is a consideration. Does this all fit together in a reasonable system that achieves accountability on the one hand, that is also protecting public safety on the other, and that fits together in a system that makes sense? Because different pieces were adopted at different times in response to, somewhat overlapping problems, but each with their own wrinkles. And it is very hard to get your handle on. Frankly, I think for voters, it's hard as elected officials to really view that as a thoughtful system as a whole. So again, that's a secondary. That's not your problem. That's just the reality of where we are in Portland, Oregon right now, that we have these different pieces pulling different directions. But to the extent we can rationalize these conflicting demands and committees, I think there's value, and some will go away as a part of this process. But I just let's start with that.
Thank you, City Commissioner Gonzalez. And I know we send you a couple of questions, but before we answer, you give you opportunity to answer those questions, I will pass it to Commissioner Charlie. Commissioner Charlie?
Thank you, Victoria. Before I ask my question, I want you to know who's asking it. My name is Charlie Michelle Wesley. I'm a tribal member of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and I am a co-chair of this phase. I'm also a witness to a victim of a target of and a survivor of police violence, up to and including being shot at. I lived in a very poor neighborhood in poverty. I'm a person of color, and I never talked back. I never resisted arrest, but police come in and see you and automatically do those things I just said. And not just to me, but family members and community members of color and other marginalized folks. And this goes back decades, not just since George Floyd's murder. Okay, so when this measure came along, it gave me a glimmer of hope that maybe at some point, if we really do this thing the way community needs it done, and I'm talking BIPOC community, not just the gentrified folks that don't want to see the failure of our American culture. And so police are right now trained to respond to less than 10% of the calls they're going out on. And I just like seeing, you know, why can't we over resource and meet people's needs? Because what you're seeing is people's needs not being met versus over policing. And so I'm leading up to my question. We're punishing people at the worst times of their lives, whether it's mental health, addiction, homelessness, suicide, and meeting them with guns in a violent way. So my question is, in this new PAC, Police Accountability Board, would you like to see, and I'm asking from a truly humanitarian place versus a political place, how do we get police to be held accountable? And would you like to see this in this board for how they have been treating BIPOC people like me and like many of the people I know and am related to and love?
Well,
Are you willing just to
go
see?
ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I want to make sure I heard the full question if there were any additional pieces there.
Yeah, like what would you like to see in this board, this new board, to address that, to hold them accountable for targeting BIPOC people the way they do? That's no surprise across the entire nation, and always has been.
Yeah, and I think the race and police is a complex topic, and there have certainly been instances in Portland, statewide and nationally, of racist behaviors by police officers, unfair targeting of certain communities. I also hear from Portlanders every day, and some of our most diverse populations, they feel under-policed. I hear both of those from Portland citizens. And when I say under-policed, they feel that, they call 911, they're not getting a response, that if there's crimes committed in their neighborhood, that there's not sufficient response from a criminal justice system and from the police. So I hear both parts of that. And what I think part of the solution, not a complete one, is certainly oversight and accountability. I mean, that's a cornerstone, a key component, that a police officer steps over a line, that they respond to, they're made answerable for that, and that we clearly set those expectations and we follow through on it. And I think the PAC has a place for that, a big role there. There's other components, we, as many urban police departments, the city of Portland's police often pull from outside of the city, outside of the neighborhoods. And I think that creates a us versus them mentality. Unfortunately, I continue to push our police department to recruit from neighborhoods in the city to the extent possible. I think that is essential, that we're policing from within the communities. I think that's a big piece of this, to minimize sort of the us versus them mindset that emerges. But I think, I think those are two really big components, and policing is complex, and policing in terms of race is complex. Without accountability, we get what we saw in 2020. And on the flip side, what some of the more marginalized neighborhoods in the city tell me every single day is they don't want less police, they want more. They just want good and accountable police in their neighborhoods. And that's the ongoing tension from a policymaker's perspective, that we protect, that we respond, we provide people justice on the one hand, but we hold police officers accountable when they step over the line.
Thank you, City Commissioner Gonzalez. Commissioner Faith, do you want ask your question, or do you want to wait until Commissioner Gonzalez answer the questions that were sent to him? It's up to you.
I'd love to ask a question now.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you for coming. My name is Faith Aiken. I use she, her pronouns. I really appreciate having you here as overseeing the safety bureaus of the city. And I think one of the things that we've heard in talking to community is there can often be conflation between police accountability and being anti-safety or anti-police. And I think we've tried to be really explicit in what we share, in that besides whatever political feelings we have or experience with police, what our narrowed focus here is police accountability, and that's not antithetical to safety. And so I'm curious for you, what ways you can support us in that message that police accountability is not the antithesis to public safety. And I think for our work to be meaningful in the city of Portland, and particularly for folks who are skeptical of conflating police accountability with anti-police, if you would be willing to help us with that message, particularly as you wear the hat around safety. Could you help us with that?
I think it's a great question. I mean, one of the pieces that I think we can pull from our criminal justice system in general is just the concept of due process, and the concept that you're innocent until proven guilty, right? And that's a cornerstone of our criminal justice system. And I think it needs to apply when we're talking about allegations of police misconduct. There needs to be an assumption of innocence. There has to be a respect for process until they've been proven guilty of a crime or misconduct. And I think that's so important, because I think that builds faith in the system for those who would question whether police accountability is just anti-police, right? If they know there is process that protects the accused, and in this case, police, when we're talking about police accountability, that is the accused. I think that builds confidence in the system. I think that helps communicate to folks that are concerned about it. And so you build a robust process that reflects both the space to make the allegations and space to defend. I think you go a long way there. And second, I just think we lean in on the reality that we are a democratic, free society, and in such a society, police have to be accountable ultimately to elected officials, ultimately to independent bodies that are outside of the reporting structure. That's the only way this works. And so I think we have to lean in on that messaging. So good, robust process that, that assumes innocence until guilt, or at least creates space for, a robust discussion of the underlying facts that doesn't judge before the process is completed. I think that will inspire confidence in those who might question what police accountability is really about. And I think that helps get us down the road. Let's start with those pieces. By the way, that's not easy work. I mean, process isn't easy, right? I mean, this is the criminal justice has to adjust all the time to kind of get the right balances between those making the allegations and those defending against the allegations. And when we're talking about police misconduct, it's the same constant tinkering to try and keep that balance between the accused and those making the claims. It's hard work, but I think respect for process is essential. One last piece, and I reflect on the last couple of years of some of the most intense moments around police misconduct allegations. I think it is essential for anyone in an elected position or in a role of responsibility to keep their powder dry on allegations really come out. And I think we've seen instances where people get on Twitter and make quick comments about allegations about police either way and have come back to regret and have negatively contributed to the dialogue on that. So the last piece there is, let the facts come out, do the work, create a process that respects that, and sometimes hold back until we really know the facts. I think it's an important part of any process, including when with respect to police oversight.
Thank you, City Commissioner Gonzalez. I know you, with your answers to the questions of the commissioners, you have partially answered a couple of the questions that were sent to you. But is anything else you want to add to those questions, to those answers, and answer the ones that you haven't been able to answer?
Sure. I mean, I'm looking through right now. I think the first one, what does accountability mean to you? I think we've hit on some pieces of that. I will call out, and it doesn't always feel this way, but when you talk to the police, they think an essential part of accountability, and it will transcend this body's responsibility. You kind of are outside of this, but they believe that an essential component is effective training and tools and internal accountability within the police department. And again, we always will need an independent body overseeing that, connected to it, reviewing it. But it's just a call out that within police, there is an emphasis at times that we've got to train our folks. We have to hold them accountable against what they're trained on. And that there is always going to be a component of that starts within the police department itself, that they're holding their own accountable. Second, I mean, I've alluded to body cameras is absolutely crucial on Portland Police. We have got to get over that hump as soon as possible. I'll transition a little bit to independent judgment. And this almost goes in the opposite direction what I just alluded to, that police hold that there's a part of the system that where police hold themselves accountable. Well, independent judgment is someone coming in with a fresh set of eyes that isn't captured by that bureaucracy, right? That is an independent look at it. And that means that, you're not part of the police bureau reviewing these facts and these allegations. So I think again, you can lean on some principles in the criminal justice system. So a disinterested reviewer of the facts is a key component of independent judgment. And I look forward to ultimately what comes out of PAC on that. But I think spiritually, it's got to be someone who is not separately vested in the outcome of the review of the matter. I'm looking through here some of your other questions. Let's see.
It will be good for you if I read it to you, or?
Sure. I feel like I've hit some of these, but I'll skip down to the bottom one and work back up. With respect to reports, what would be helpful? I think we really need to see the volume of output. You gave some specific examples here, and I'm not sure I really have a strong opinion about one way or another. I'd probably lean towards the more annualized reports initially. But if we're talking a 100-page report, as in your example, then I would start with the annual, and if it gets that voluminous, then maybe we would accelerate on a greater cadence. I think there's opportunities for you to make stuff available more often digitally, but in terms of a formal report, I think once a year seems reasonable out of the gate. Let's see. Number 3, things which have included or not included in the PAC recommendations might affect commissioner support for the recommendations as a whole. Again, I get back to the fidelity for what voters approved, and wherever possible to be rationalizing and not adding more complexity to the police oversight function in the region. And again, that's just taking into account these other pieces, DOJ settlement and some of the other boards that are out there, and just thinking through how they all will fit together into a understandable system. I think that with respect to your second question, desired goals for what the new system should look like, I think I've alluded to it specifically to PAC. I do, firmly believe that for our city to function, we need to reestablish a expectation of basic public safety in our city. I think there's been both a deterioration in real public safety and a perception in public safety. And that's more than police and criminal justice. That includes medical emergencies, fire. It's all connected. It's all part of one system, both in terms of the perception and reality of public safety. And we have really fundamental challenges there right now for Portland, frankly, in a way that I've not seen in my adult lifetime. We've had darker days in the city of Portland, maybe in its long history, but over the last 25 years, I'm not sure we've seen as low a point in terms of both real and perceived public safety in the city. And again, that's more than police, that's more than crime, it's just across the board. And I think that for our city to succeed, we have to address that. Our ability to attract and retain police officers is absolutely a component of that. And so when I look at PAC, I will still want to make sure that we're creating a system that's going to make us competitive when we have to recruit police officers that comes across as fair. I do want to emphasize one other point here. When I deal with Portland Fire, they are adamant that we have to have sufficient police on the streets of Portland to protect them. I hear this from EMSs and medical that are responding to difficult situations in our community as well. So I would just put that out there that we have to create a system that is perceived to be fair for everyone involved, and that doesn't, overly negatively impact our ability to recruit good and responsible public safety officers. I could get into some other pieces that are tangentially related on public safety if you'd like in the questions, but I think I'll keep it at that with respect to PAC. Was there any of your other big questions that I have not hit on?
Thank you, City Commissioner Gonzalez. Yes, Commissioner Sima.
Greetings, Commissioner Gonzalez, Simab Husseini, he, him, his. And appreciate you being on with us tonight. And just my question was that at what point do you think that, or do you think that there's a point where an accountability system would make, I guess, just to be much more direct with my question than dancing around it and trying to find the best political way to say it, as oftentimes like recruitment can be or accountability can be used as a reason why recruitment, it would dissuade recruitment from police in the city of Portland. So at what point do you think like an accountability system, in your mind, do you have a fear of that at any point? And what do you think would be a point where it would dissuade recruitment or be used as a reason why recruitment is not working?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question and fair question. I honestly, at times I'm more concerned about irresponsible comments from public officials than I am about the system of accountability driving away candidates. I think what we say as electeds is important. I think that a good, robust system that survives judicial review, that can withstand the burden of what a collective bargaining agreement will do to it, is likely not going to be what's driving candidates away from applying for the city of Portland. But I think what's essential is that when police officers do well, we show our appreciation. And when there is a gray matter, that we create space for process and we don't judge before that process is completed. So I don't know that, I think you guys do your job and you build a fair system, do the best you can, and let's give it a shot. And and at the same time, when there's allegations of misconduct, hold your fire until we know the facts. And I think that's as important as anything in building trust in a system that we can recruit candidates to.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Commissioner Simovic, Commissioner Gonzalez. Commissioner Gunn?
Oh, hello, good evening, Commissioner Gonzalez. I'm Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. You've seen me testify at City Council before as a member of Portland Cop Watch, but I'm here as a commission member tonight. Before I ask my question, I want to assure you, to get to some of the concerns you've been raising, that our commission is looking at due process. Our work, what we're looking at doing is trying to build a system that's more of a level playing field, because right now it's very stacked against the community members who try to file complaints against police, and a very small percentage of complaints ever get sustained against officers, even when there's apparent misconduct. So we're just trying to kind of have a level playing field, and I think we're all well, I can't speak for everybody, but I think that the design that we have right now is hopefully going to do that, to make it so that it's fair for the police, but it's also fair for the community members. And I think that's the concern that we heard from the voters that you were talking about and the ballot measure. So having observed the politics of the city for a long time, and particularly stuff around this new system, the old system and the new system, one of the things I think I'm concerned about is that the police association, who we talk to as one of our guests like you, will not tell us directly if they're concerned about some of the design that we're coming up with, and then rather wait until we get through it and hand it to the City Council. Are you able to help us get them to talk to us before that stage, so that we can find out what they're concerned about and hopefully address it, so that everybody, including the police association, will be on board when we get to City Council with our proposal? Are you able to do that? I know you have communication with the police association, so I'm just asking if that's something you think you can help us with.
Dan, I'm happy to have that conversation with them. I have not had a specific conversation with them about PAC in any detailed way, but I don't think what you're asking for there is an unfair request, and fully recognizing, anytime you have a body that's protected by a collective bargaining agreement, there's always this sort of interesting dynamic. Again, my public safety bureaus, I interact with collective bargaining agreements on a number of fronts, and there is a question about how much they want to put on the table outside of the context of bargaining. That's not unique to police. It's not unique to public safety oriented unions. But I'd be happy to be a part of that conversation, attempt to facilitate that. And I'd like to understand what they're specifically concerned about there. But just to be clear, I mean, collective bargaining agreements have pretty significant pieces often in how you handle allegations of misconduct. Again, that transcends police. That's not just them, but and so I am curious the interplay between how they perceive their own collective bargaining agreement and that, but be happy to ask the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Catherine?
Thank you.
Hi, Catherine.
Catherine McDowell again. And I just had a question for you, sort of hearkening back to your comment about hoping to see more police officers recruited from the city of Portland itself. We're looking at those kind of considerations now in this phase as we figure out who's going to be on the board. The board will have a significant amount of responsibility in our design. I think we see the board as both overseeing the new oversight body, but also engaging in the process of reviewing cases and deciding the cases and deciding the discipline that is appropriate if someone is found to be guilty of misconduct. So the responsibility will be significant both from an oversight and policy standpoint and from an actual, hearing cases and deciding cases. So I guess I'd be interested in your thoughts on who do you think. I think we're looking at a board of 20, 25 folks to be able to provide that function. And we're looking at, trying to pull from, all relevant populations and interests and constituencies. So I'd be curious to understand what you think might be some important considerations as we design that piece of the future board. Thank you.
Yeah, Catherine, that's a good question, and it's a tough one because when I think of many of the ethnic communities, for example, in East Portland, we have an incredibly diverse population as you move east of 82nd, and these are historically some of the communities where there's been simultaneously concern about over policing and concerns about under policing. I literally hear both in many of those communities, and the mechanism in which they engage with the city of Portland as a whole, not just on something like police accountability, but just in the election process and engagement with elected officials, there are certainly a number of community-oriented groups that connect with a certain segment of that population, but there's also, it feels like sometimes a whole other components that just are a little bit more off the grid. And I don't know that I have a simple answer for that. We're going through the same question on things like, how do we communicate, how do we engage with communities on redoing 82nd Avenue, right? And how do you really get outreach and get voices out of the communities that are going to be impacted by those changes? And there's a lot of work given to how you to pull them up. I think that, but so I'm what I just said is sort of a hedge on what I will say. There are, I think at the end of the day, you do have to work with some of the existing community groups to identify folks who would be interested in it. And that's, I think, the best we have. There are limitations. Again, there are people that are outside the grid that don't necessarily engage with the most prominent affinity groups that have been associated with their particular population, but it's probably the best we got to identify folks. I do think that it's important to have a diversity of age. And I think that for certain of our immigrant communities in particular, the older generations aren't necessarily as inclined to be engaged politically as sometimes the younger ones. I think that sometimes is a miss. I think sometimes we lose out on their perspective on things like public safety. We can get into why that is on another time, but I think that's important that when you're talking about any of those populations, that we're getting a cross section of just not ethnicity, but relative age. Because I do think they're going to bring different perspectives on things like policing and accountability. I wish that were an easy thing to answer, but it's not. And sometimes the folks that are most inclined to sign up and participate are going to come with a certain lens, and you're trying to balance that out. And I don't know that I have a great answer on how to get that balance outside the maybe just age diversity as a piece.
Thank you. We're gonna take a question of Commissioner Sophia, then we will go to a public comment. Commissioner Sophia?
Thank you so much. And thank you, Commissioner Gonzalez, for taking the time to talk to us. I have a couple broad questions, and it's pulling from what Commissioner Catherine or Co-Chair Catherine has brought up, is getting the diversity in a board. We're working on that right now. And you brought up some of the issues. You brought up some of the issues that we have for selecting folks, and how do we get that diversity? We're trying, of course, as well. But what I would like to ask of you, considering whatever we come up with on the board, I've been a bit concerned about the protections of the board members, as far as, they're public now, they're in this public eye. They're making some decisions that are going to be very controversial to some folks. And how does the commission, the city commissioners, protect these volunteers? Because we've seen, even you all, as the city commissioners, are not exempt from having safety issues. So how can you all help us protect this board? I mean, just recently, public records requests had come out, and there's been some folks that had no say-so in it, and neither did we, frankly. So how do we protect ourselves? And how do you suppose, how does the commissioner, city commissioner propose to help us with that? Because I find it very concerning, especially for those that we're trying to get on our community, or on our board, from these diverse communities. People don't have the same resources. So, and then also we have the police to protect us if we're making decisions against the police. How do we protect ourselves, and how do you all, have you all thought about that, and how can you help us with that? Thank you.
Sophia, it's a great question. And just to level set a little bit on my experience as a candidate, now as elected official, I asked my consultant very early in my own campaign, well, how do I prepare my wife and my family for what I'm about to go through? And at first, he didn't know what I was talking about. He didn't quite get it, what the question I was asking. And it was really around both perceived and real safety as a public official that's identifiable, whose home address is registered publicly. He made an observation that been doing politics for the Northwest for 25 years, and it's really only been the last 3 years that we've seen this deterioration. It doesn't mean that there wasn't protests 3 years ago, but the threats of physical violence against elected officials, against public officials in the region in the Northwest, it took a decisive turn for the worse in recent years. And that just wasn't a piece that you had to build in to the degree you do now. I'll tell you, in the city of Portland, there has been substantial increased investment in protecting elected officials in recent years because felt obligated to. My campaign office was vandalized a number of times. There were public threats made against me during the election. There have been threats against my home made since I was elected. And at times there has been a robust protection for that. And I think as a society, we have to all help communicate that while there's going to be difficult decisions made, that there's going to be political disagreement, that the First Amendment is essential, and that people have the right to, protest and to speak up when they disagree with a public official. But basic respect for someone's home and their privacy, even if they're elected official, is, I think we all have a role in setting what's the line that we're not going to cross, and what is what is acceptable. That's, you can protest at City Hall all you want, and, don't break anything, but it's like, try not to disrupt a meeting, but you have the right in the public square to protest, but leave people's homes alone, and respect basic process and how we engage. That's just, I think we all have a role there, right? Like, condemn when people cross the line, continue to create spaces for proper exercise of First Amendment rights, and just clearly articulating when one is in one category and one is in the other. I don't know that I have a perfect answer beyond that. The state legislature took up some pieces on this. The terminology they've used has sort of evolved from domestic terrorists to, political violence. And I don't know that it would protect the commission members or members of your board. That's something I haven't seen the latest version of it. I do think that we need to continue to evaluate at state law, like people's home addresses. Is that really essential that that's accessible? Again, for elected officials, we don't have a choice. I file, it's whether, at least in the state of Oregon, there's no choice. And but finding some basic privacy for those members, I certainly would be supportive of it in terms of, I don't know why anyone needs their home address. I don't know why that needs to be at first blush, why that needs to be a public record. And I'm sure there's public record advocates who might argue otherwise, but I will tell you, in my 105 days or so on city council, you can look at the public records laws, you can conclude that something should be exempt from it, but city attorney will sometimes come and say, you know what, to be safe, we should disclose. And there's good reasons for that. The lawyers on the call can explain why sometimes you will over disclose, even when it's not technically required, but that can lead to some unfortunate outcomes and potentially disclosing stuff that is by the letter of the law, not required under Oregon law. And so I think that's another area that we need to continue to evaluate what we're doing there in terms of, do we need to tighten up any of the public records? I wish I had a simple answer for you. I wish that was a short answer. I don't. And I think 4 years ago, that was easier to answer in the polite city of Portland than it is in, Portland 2023. And I just wish that weren't the case, but it's a very good and fair question.
Thank you, Commissioner Gonzalez. Now we will not take public comment on the issues discussed in the briefing. We ask members of the public to keep their comments on the briefing or questions to Commissioner Gonzalez to 1 minute in length at most, and raise their hand in Zoom if you like to speak. I also would recommend to the public that they go right away to their questions. That way more people can ask questions, because we only have a couple minutes. And now I invite members of the public to raise their hands if they have questions to City Commissioner Gonzalez. Okay, I think there is, let me see. Yes, thank you. I see Dr. Jim. Please, Dr. Jim, can you can ask your question now.
Okay. Hi, Commissioner Gonzalez, and welcome to the City Council. And thanks to the other commissioners. I'm a prevention public health specialist physician, and I value upstream prevention, including prevention of violence, using the evidence-based methods of public health. I also value law enforcement and police. However, in terms of public investment, we've got to balance upstream versus downstream interventions to keep public safety and keep our population healthy and doing well. We can't address root causes using police. We can't address all root causes using police. However, we invest far more percentage of our public dollars into policing and law enforcement, and it's unfair to depend on police to achieving all the objectives that we're asking them to do. So my question really is, or my comment really is, how about really focusing police on fewer things with less money invested, and then put more money into more upstream services, including really pushing evidence-based public health interventions to prevent violence way upstream, and as well as other things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jim. And before Commissioner Gonzalez answer you. I also want to check if somebody else from the public has another question. That way he can answer to several questions since we have. Is there anybody else from this? Anybody else from the public that has question? Please, if you can
Yes,
raise your hand.
There's several people. There's Michelle, Kate, and Babs.
Thank you. And I will ask members of the public and thank you very much, Dr. Jim. If you can ask your question right away, that way Commissioner Gonzalez can answer all these questions and we will take a note of the questions. Then I will send it to Babs. Please, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. I always introduce myself as a almost 75-year-old lifelong Portland resident. So I'm extremely passionate about my city of roses. Thank you, Commissioner Gonzalez, for your thoughtful answers. My question has to do with, for lack of a better word, sensitivity training. In other words, educational forums for new recruits, perhaps, or seasoned police officers that might include forums with members of the community, such as the BIPOC community. There was a commissioner who did ask a question and made comments specifically about that. Again, the sensitivity training sounds kind of cliche. Okay, thank you. I see my time is up.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Babs. We appreciate it. And then I will pass it to Michelle and then Kate, that way, and we can answer all the questions. Welcome, Michelle. Can you ask your question, please? Welcome for being here.
Hi, can you guys hear me? I'm assuming.
Yes.
I want to be quick. I wanted to comment on Commissioner Gonzalez's comment on Southeast Portland or East Portland, preferring, like, some people really want more police and some people are complaining that they're being overpoliced. And I live in Pelhurst, Gilbert. I've had a situation where I had to come forward about misconduct from years ago by a policeman. I was encouraged to do it by the racial justice protests. And I believe that the police have spent a lot of time watching me as a result. And they had enough time to watch me, but they didn't have enough time to respond immediately to my neighbor who had a gun put to her head, the sweetest lady who's a nurse, a child who was held at knife point, and the neighbors tackled the guy and held him down for 3 hours and the police never came. 5 or 6 major fires that almost hit the apartment complex that only the fire department showed up, but the police never showed up. So, like, you know, thank you so much. That's all. And
Thank you, Michelle. We really appreciate you. Thank you. Kate?
Hi, I just put it in the Q&A.
Okay.
If that's okay, you could read it. I just have, yeah, it was easier for me to type. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone from the public that came and asked questions. And now I will pass it to Commissioner Gonzalez. And if somebody that took note can post it on the chat, that way he can answer the questions, we will really appreciate it. Go ahead, Commissioner Gonzalez.
So I'm going to do my best to get this in the right order. Dr. Godini, thank you for your questions about upstream investment. I mean, we look at the history of mental illness treatment, for example, in the state of Oregon, our access to addiction services, the challenges with our public safety, our public education systems. These are all essential investments upstream that contribute positively to a healthy society, that are frankly the most effective, along with economic opportunities in a robust social fabric, are the most effective ways to prevent crime, to address crime. So at a level, I think there, you know, you and I have very strong alignment on where I think the best investments are. A healthy society where people have hope and opportunity are the greatest public safety investments we can make in terms of return on investment. The reality is that at this point in 2023, we do not have a thriving mental illness system in the state of Oregon. By many metrics, we're near the bottom nationally. We do not have great access to addiction services, despite all the promises of Measure 110. We've had a public school system that has struggled in many respects and was weakened by our response to the COVID, unfortunately. And so you look at a number of upstream components of our society that are not strong in Oregon, that have been weakened. And we're seeing that manifested in crime in our community. And it's unfortunate. So the challenge is, what do we do when parts of the social fabric are torn asunder, when we are facing real crime on our streets? I share with you the preference to invest in the upstream. At the same time, we have to face the reality of what we're seeing on the streets of Portland right now. And by many standards, we were historically a very safe city. We are an average city now, and that moving from very safe to average feels pretty bad for a lot of Portlanders. And so I just would leave it at that. I align with you on the preference for upstream investments. But there's always this element of pragmatism that when we have not achieved a super healthy society from a mental illness addiction, ho-hum public school system that's been weakened in recent years, and a lot of disruption in both our economic activity and just general social fabric, we are facing those social ills in a big way right now. And unfortunately, there is always going to be a dependence on police and our public safety apparatus to respond in those situations. I think the second question was around sensitivity training. I think in particular, when we're talking about our more diverse populations, culturally specific de-escalation is an important component. I will say that I was really thrilled in the last class for Portland Police to see the diversity there. A lot coming from East Portland neighborhoods, particularly represented. I think it was Vietnamese American, Chinese American, and I can never get the ethnic group correct, but Cambodian American, all in the same class. And it was really exciting to see. These are Portland raised kids that are going to become Portland police officers, coming from the neighborhoods, coming from the community. Does that solve all of the questions about how to communicate with communities of color? No, but it helps. I think that we're getting people from, if we can continue to get people from the neighborhoods, it's going to have a positive impact. It's not going to fix everything, but it's a component. And I am not privy to the current specifics on de-escalation training for police officers beyond that, but it is a component and that's important. Let's see, I have lost track. So what was the third question?
The third question, they relate to the PAC work, and we have it here on the chat. Say, do you believe civilians should also be granted due process in their encounters with police? Do you see that as an important part of accountability?
Absolutely. I mean, again, that's a cornerstone of our criminal justice system, innocent until proven guilty. If you're talking in terms of allegations made against a citizen, it is absolutely a cornerstone, and it's the simple answer is absolutely yes.
Thank you. And I know you answered this, but how would you, maybe you want to add something, how would you define a successful and effective police force? In other words, what are your accountability expectations for the Bureau as a whole?
I mean, police have to answer for crime in a community. That is a component, and they're not the only factor there. But when you look at our rates of homicides, rates of other crimes, that is a component by which we assess the performance of a police department. Certainly, acts of police misconduct are also metrics. How often are police officers deemed to have engaged in misconduct, particularly serious ones? I think those are all metrics that are part of the consideration. There are some below the hood that are also important that I'll just highlight real high. There are some efforts underway in some targeted crime prevention. There's one in particular in East Portland around vehicle thefts. They've seen a dramatic reduction in the number of car stops they have to do to find a stolen car, right? So it used to take 33 car stops to get a single stolen car. They're down in the single digits. And a later time, we could walk you through what they're doing to reduce that ratio. That's a really positive metric, right? Because they're using a data-driven approach to really assess the variables that predict when a car is stolen. They're not dependent in this methodology on the color of someone's skin, the way that person looks. They are dependent on variables associated with their car, and that it is leading to simultaneously dramatic impacts on crime. Because when you stop stolen cars, you're taking guns off the street, you're taking a high rate of drugs off the street. There are side benefits to going after stolen cars that related to other crimes. And you're also reducing the number of instances of misconduct, and particularly racial profiling. They're using other variables that aren't in any way tied to someone's race or appearance. And so I think these are really net positives. Again, that might not be a high level metric that we'd assess police performance, but it's a secondary one. It speaks to their efficiency in simultaneously going after crime and avoiding some of the more negative impacts of prior techniques in pursuing crime.
Thank you, City Commissioner Gonzalez. We really appreciate the time you spent with us. It was great, all your answers and your patience and everything. Thank you. We want to let you know we would like to invite you again to the commissioner, maybe in June and July. Hopefully you can be available to meet with us again. We appreciate it. We also appreciate Grace. Thank you for being here with us. And now we are gonna take a break, a short break for the commissioner to continue with our agenda. Again, thank you very much. We're gonna take a 6 minutes break and we're gonna come back at 8:29. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're gonna continue, but now what we're gonna do is we're gonna give time to Commissioner Dan and Commissioner Ajay to give us, I'm gonna pass it to them to present about their subcommittee. It's gonna be a quick update. Commissioner Ajay and Commissioner Dan. You are on mute.
I am indeed. My co-chair was going to start off, and if they're ready. Is the board membership going to go?
Hello, pulling up my notes here. Okay, so I'm Tirsa, she, her, currently subcommittee co-chair of the board membership subcommittee along with Obi. And we last met on the 10th, on this last Monday. And we have a rough draft document that we went over with with the exception of one section. And we have a couple of pending items that we will be going over at our next meeting, which the date is to be determined. And so, yeah, we examined the PAC areas of agreement on barriers to police accountability and best practices that was worked on at a previous phase. And we also looked at the areas of agreement on proposals to consider and to avoid from subject matter experts. And then we also examined the areas of agreement on best practices to avoid from other jurisdictions. And we sort of pulled from those to put together this rough document, as well as members have done other research. And that's where we're at.
Thank you, Commissioner Tirsa. And now, Commissioner Dan, would you like to?
Sure. Well, my co-chair appears to be in the audience right now. I don't know if there's a way to activate their audio for them.
Okay. Let me see.
Hello.
Oh, hi, welcome, Commissioner J. Welcome.
Yeah, please excuse my cat meowing in the background. So yeah, this last week, Dan and I went through the draft areas of agreement, incorporated a lot of the amazing feedback and conversations we had at our last meeting for the first half of the document, and the last half of the document just kind of, cleaned it up to be reviewed and get more, maybe more feedback on our next meeting. So yeah, we're chugging along. We're almost there. And yeah, I'll pass it back to Commissioner Handelman to talk maybe a little bit about the budget.
Thank you, Co-Chair Amici. So yeah, so the Oversight Staff Subcommittee, I think we met on the 3rd, and we're meeting again this Monday, the 17th at 6:30. And as was mentioned, part of our scope is to look at the budget, and it's not to mean that we're going to say you're going to spend this much on this and this much on that, but just we have to make sure that what we're trying to do by having however many commissioners, how many members are going to be on the board, and however many staff people will be needed to fulfill the investigations and the other roles that we're laying out for them, that amount of money fits within the 5% of the police budget we know that we're being given. So we're working on working through that along with the points of agreement that we're hoping to vote on Monday. And then hopefully we'll have it for you at the next full meeting of the commission.
Thank you, Commissioner J, Commissioner Dan, and Commissioner Tirsa, and Commissioner Obi for your updates. We appreciate it. Now we're gonna move into discussing the draft areas of agreement and reporting and transparency. We ask you to follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitated, and remember that we use a weighted stack in our discussions. Finally, please be forward-looking in your comments. Will the co-chairs like to get the discussion started? I will pass it to the co-chairs.
So Connie, did you want to start, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we worked on this a while back, and I think we were down to like 3 paragraphs at the end. So my suggestion is we just pick up where we left off, and we hopefully will be able to finish this in short order.
Perfect.
And I hope our staff remembers which paragraph we were on when we stopped, because I don't. But I just remember we were very, very close to the end.
So
I remember.
yeah, so I did need to brush up. It's been
yeah, it's okay. I understand.
Yeah, no, so this is the full table of contents. There's nothing to scroll past. So just wanted to show this quickly. There are 2 sections at the end that have not been discussed. There may be more on B5, which was where it ended, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And then there was a request to get an opportunity to look back at B2 in that list, which might relate as well to the briefing just heard. That's what remains in the document, is these 2 things for sure, plus 2 possible things. So the commission on March 30th got all the way through this list and ended up at accessibility. There were 3 proposed changes. You can see the comments, and those were all resolved. Normally there would be an opportunity for members to make other proposed changes before moving on, and that was essentially where we ran out of time. So effectively, the text doesn't show any track changes because those were all accepted, approved by the commission, and would pick back up with if there's anything else on this section. And I'll pass it back to co-chairs.
So if we were gonna read through, would it make sense, Samir, to start with the beginning of this particular section?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, I'll start reading then and then pass it off to Connie when we get to confidentiality. Okay, accessibility. Any communications by the Oversight Board shall be written and archived with attention to accessibility and organization. Communication shall prioritize sharing with the public in language that is as clear and simple as possible. While language will be clear and concise, it will not come at the expense of omitting essential details. When appropriate, communication shall follow best practice and inclusive writing, which can be referenced in the Office of Equity and Human Rights Writing Guide. And footnote to that. If necessary, this information may be stored on a website other than the city's website. Populations most at risk of harm at the hands of police shall be prioritized in communication that is culturally specific, relevant, and easily digestible. These priority populations include, but are not limited to, people experiencing mental illness, people with disabilities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. These accessibility standards also apply to the storage, categorization, and archiving of information on the Oversight Board's website.
Thank you, Co-Chair Debbie. Is there questions, comments? Okay, can we move on? Can we move on? Okay, yeah, Commissioner Charlie, would you like to make a comment or you just saying, okay, go ahead, Commissioner Charlie.
Hi, yes, I was just thinking about that last where it says Black, Indigenous, people of color, Black, Brown, Indigenous, and people of color, because I mean, our brown brothers and sisters are a very large population in our country. So it just feels like they're being left out. They could fall under that part, people of color, but it just, yeah. I always, you know, when they do the BIPOC, I always do BBIPOC. Just if I were brown, I wouldn't want to feel so left out.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Charlie. Is there any additional questions or comments? No, then I will ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Oh, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Connie, you want to talk? Oh, no, you're just saying you agree, right? Can I ask again, is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? I can see your hand. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we move on? Okay, thank you. Co-chair Connie?
Sure. B6, confidentiality, limits of transparency. The director, when requested, shall protect the confidentiality of the complainants, members or witnesses consistent with the requirements of the Oregon Public Records Law, except insofar as disclosures may be necessary to enable the director to carry out their duties or to comply with applicable collective bargaining agreements, or the disclosure of records is directed by the district attorney. When considering a request for public records, the director shall consult with the appropriate police bureau personnel and obtain approval from the police bureau prior to the disclosure of the PPB records as required under the Oregon Public Records Law. The board can propose the release of otherwise confidential information.
Thank you, Co-Chair Connie. Is there questions, comments? No. Can we ask? Okay, let me see. Okay. Okay, yes, staff?
Thank you. Yes, so just really quick, there are two types of changes you'll see in track changes that are just typographical things requested since the last meeting. One is changing member to officer. There's text that refers to bureau members, which refers to sworn officers, but just making that clearer. And the other is adding police before bureau wherever possible. So those are just typographical changes. They're not proposed substantive changes. And then I should just note that this was not marked as resolved, but as you can see, there was a answer given to that question. And if anyone wants more clarity, we could ask for it, but just wanted to ensure that you all knew you had that info now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Dan wrote something on the chat. Commissioner Dan, would you like to say something?
I think staff is taking care of it, that the word that says members up, they're fixing it to say officers.
Thank you. And just for clarity, I'm gonna ask the question, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Okay, thank you. Can we move on? Thank you. Co-Chair Debbie?
Yeah, I can do the next section.
I'm
If
so
there's
sorry.
more, is there more?
There's one sentence just below the footnote that's
Okay.
apologies.
That's okay. The board can propose, is that the one? The board can propose the release of otherwise confidential information?
Can we move on? Okay.
Okay, and I'll do this little section here. Information distribution and community engagement. Agency staff and board members will widely distribute complaint forms in languages and formats accessible to the public, provide education on the importance of reporting complaints, and hold public meetings to hear general concerns about police and agency services. Police Bureau member business cards distributed to community members during police actions and encounters will include oversight agency contact information so that the public will know where to file complaints.
Thank you, Co-Chair Debbie. Is there any questions, comments for this section? Can we move on? Oh, yes, Commissioner Monica, would you raise your hand to make a question or comment?
I would just, would it be stronger to change will to must? Must include oversight agency contact information?
That seems fine to me.
Thank you. Then, thank you, Commissioner Monica. Then I'm gonna ask the question just for clarity. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Okay, we can move on.
So this is the end of the document. There is one request that was made to go back and take a second look at this list because it was looked at, but it was the first time the full commission had seen it and it doesn't all fit onto a single page, or a single screen. So just wanted to give everyone a chance to look it over and propose any changes if they would like to, but or not, as the case may be.
Okay,
Would you like me to read it out loud?
I defer to co-chairs on that. Yeah.
I guess we might as well, Commissioner Co-Chair Connie, if you want to start.
Okay. Annual reported required contents, overview. Overview of the accountability system. Vision, mission, and values. Message from board leadership or officers. Message from the executive director. About the oversight board and agency. Information and resources about the oversight board. Duties and powers of the oversight board. Processes, procedures, and definitions relevant to the agency's work, such as how complaints are processed and adjudicated. Stages of complaint handling. Member biographies, agency staff, training and professional development, organizational structure, board activities, summary of committee work, and then policy recommendations related to policies and practices, collective bargaining agreements, city ordinances, and state law, the status and outcome of any previous recommendations. For any recommendations that have not been implemented, the reasons, with an emphasis on persistent issues not yet addressed by PPB and the City Council, and analysis of the closed cases for policy implications. Complaints of alleged officer misconduct. Complaints by year, quarter, allegations by unit, type, employees named in complaints to the extent allowed by law and policy, information regarding uniformed personnel who were the subject of multiple complaints, complaints who filed multiple complaints, and issues that were raised by multiple complaints to the extent allowed by law and policy, the number of named employees who have received 2 or more sustained complaints within 1 year to the extent allowed by law and policy, cases, allegations, officer, and complainant demographics, disaggregated by geographic area, investigations, full, expedited, etc., findings and overturned findings, discipline imposed, the number and percentage of cases that were appealed or otherwise challenged, and the number of percentage of these cases in which findings and/or discipline determinations were changed, and the nature of those changes. The number and percentage of all complaints handled directly by frontline supervisors referred for supervisor action, management action, training, and alternative resolution. The number of times a police bureau employee failed to comply with the agency's request for an interview or for the production of documents, and the number of times the police bureau sworn employee failed to comply with a valid subpoena, and whether discipline was imposed for any such non-compliance. The number, nature, and settlement amount of the civil suits against the PPB officers, regardless of whether the city is a defendant in the litigation. Timeliness of complaint resolution, redacted case summaries, board actions by case number, date, and findings, trends related to officer history and complaint type, as well as frequency, consistency, and adequacy of the discipline imposed, overall patterns and trends, death cases, and mediations. And then I think finally, the outreach satisfaction, information on outreach efforts, including feedback received at community events, engagement with the public and with the police bureau, and complainant satisfaction survey results.
Thank you, Co-Chair Connie. Is there questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Sophia?
I just wanted to go back to B6, just we can make a short or quick adjustment and take out the word when.
Sophia, Commissioner Sophia, we're gonna get back to B6.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But on this list that just co-chair Connie read, can I ask if there are any questions or comments from this list? Okay, can we move on? I don't see, yeah. Oh, Commissioner Dan, would you say you want us to make a comment in this list?
Yeah, it's a comment and it's nothing to change the text, so don't worry, everybody. I just reading about listing the tort claims, the settlement amounts. I want to make sure this is like a garden plot issue to make sure that tort claims are examined for investigations. And I don't know if we put that in the officer accountability document, and IPR does that right now. And it occurred to me that I don't know if we remember to do that. So it has nothing to do with this document. It's just something that I want to make sure we don't lose when we're finalizing everything. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Okay, we will make a note about it. And then, Commissioner Monica.
I'm wondering if we should be including in here the settlement with the Department of Justice, and if there is anything in there that we also should be reporting on. I'm not sure.
So the one thing that's kind of green about, if you scroll back, comes out of the settlement agreement. That one right there, the number, nature, and settlement amount of civil suits against PPB comes out of there. I don't know. I did not go through the settlement agreement and compare it with all these things that we found from all the different jurisdictions and what past IPR reports included. So I can't say for sure if we missed anything. It sort of feels like we got a pretty good list here of stuff to put in the report, but perhaps I see Commissioner Dan maybe has an idea.
Thank you, Co-Chair Debbie, Commissioner Dan, and thank you, Commissioner Monica.
Thank you, Commissioner Arce. And so there's not only a separate entity that's doing the evaluation about whether the DOJ agreement is going in. Right now, it's the compliance officer, community liaison, but that might change. But there's also a separate body that's advising the city right now about whether or not they think they're in. It's called the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. And we hope that one day, after we get the board finished, because it's one of the elements of the DOJ agreement right now, that one day there won't be a DOJ agreement anymore. So that might be one of the things we put in the transition phase to say, so long as there is a DOJ agreement, if there's anything relevant that needs to go into the annual report from the board, they should do it. But if it ends up in city code and there is no DOJ agreement anymore, it's going to kind of be like, what's that? 20 years from now.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Monica, would you like to suggest an addition, or you are okay with the answer?
Totally okay with the answer.
Okay, thank you. And I will ask again, if you commissioners, would you think we can move on? Okay, we can move on to B6, and I know Commissioner Sophia has a question in B6. Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, I just thought instead of just saying, if we could just remove when requested.
Okay.
You just say correct to show, protect the confidentiality of complainants, officers, members. I'm sorry, our witnesses, consistent with
No, that's great. What else would you like to suggest from B6?
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Yeah. Okay.
May I? I'm sorry.
Sure, Commissioner, go ahead.
I kind of misspoke. I mean, I do want to include members too. I mean, we want their board members to have protections as well.
Okay, then officers and board members.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
didn't.
It's okay. Okay, I'm gonna ask the question just for clarification. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? And Co-Chair Debbie, you have a comment?
I have a question. The one thing I wonder about is, my understanding is that the proceedings that this new board is going to be doing will be in the public. And so I'm not quite sure about where, like, I know when I go to the Citizen Review Committee meetings, when they have appeals hearings, it's Officer A, Officer B, the appellant. So no names are used unless people go, okay, I'm okay with using my name. But the Citizen Review Committee, they're public officials, they're meeting in open, everybody knows who they are. And so you can't really protect them from people knowing that they're the ones who are involved in hearing the case. And so I'm just not quite sure how that particular thing would work.
Okay, thank you. Staff, do you know, or yeah, staff, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the confidentiality of each one of these things, these categories might be different. I would say in the context of members, it wouldn't be anonymity necessarily, but it might be things like what Commissioner Gonzalez mentioned with like home addresses and things like that, to the degree allowable under public records law. So, there's this is a draft. There's a board membership document that has some stuff there about confidentiality as well, but this would be specific to the director. And so it's not necessarily an overlap in any way. But yeah, I think that might be different than the level of confidentiality afforded to a complainant or an officer, but it would all be under the context of that law.
Thank you.
So I'm not an expert, but yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Dan?
Yeah, hearing Commissioner Iona's comment, I guess what I'd like to do is instead of having when requested in there, put something in that says, any party may waive the right to confidentiality somewhere, like at the end of that sentence. So that way, if a person says, I don't care if somebody says my name in this hearing, that the director doesn't have to feel that they have to say, no, you can't do that because I have to protect your confidentiality. Is that all right? I hope that's all right.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, I just want to add to Commissioner Dan's comment. Any party can waive the right of confidentiality upon request. So just so that it's a given that it's going to be confidential, and if you don't mind, you can do that on your own, but everyone doesn't have to do that. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna ask the question again. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to what it is now? Is there general agreement to changing from what it was to what it is now? Okay, thank you. Can we move on? Okay, we can move to C.
That's it. We did see.
Oh, we did see. Oh, wow. Okay, then we finish. The commission okay, we already did. Okay. Okay, the commission has completed discussion on the document, and next on the agenda is discussing whether the commission should approve the draft areas of agreement with all the changes we made today incorporated into the text. There is a potential agreement document that was circulated that gives some context as to the decision. Before seeing if there is a consensus around approving this document, we're going to hear from the public. After that, we will review the PAC values and goals. Finally, we'll ask if members want to make any final tweaks and then ask if they are ready for their decision. Okay. We ask members to the public to keep their comments to 1 minute in length and then keep their comments focused on the draft document. You can raise your hand and Zoom when you like to be called on. And I remind members of the public to make their comments particularly on this draft document. Do we have any? I don't see anybody.
I don't see anyone.
Thank you, Dr. Moses. Okay. Then we will, any of the members of the commission, we're gonna review the PAC values and goals. And I don't know, you wanna read it or just give a space for everyone to read on their own?
Yeah, so just by way of explanation, PAC approved values and goals on March 24th of last year. There's an introductory statement here. There's also the 6 goals that are values, which are replicated in down below. We'll just show as much as can be shown on the screen at once and then scroll in just a moment, noting that number 3 is not fully ending here.
Thank you, staff.
We'll take a little longer on number 4 because that might be the most relevant to this particular document, though not necessarily the only part.
Okay.
If it's okay, I'm going to scroll back up here and try to show as much as possible on the screen at once. And the purpose of this review is to ensure that the success criteria that you identified for yourself is something that you believe this document, the draft areas of agreement on reporting and transparency, would help you achieve. So if not, there is an opportunity in a moment to make any revisions or tweaks, and then before making the decision on whether or not to approve the document. And if anyone would like me to scroll to any particular point in this, I can do that.
You're on mute, Victoria.
Thank you, Dr. Moses. Will any of the members of the commission like to revisit any portion of the draft areas of agreement? Is there any strong opposition to approving the draft areas of agreement with all the changes we have made today incorporated into the text as the Police Accountability Commission areas of agreement on reporting and transparency? Is there general agreement around approving this document? Yay, congratulations. Then the document is approved. Okay, we will continue the next item in the agenda. And we don't have time for the definitions. And then we go directly staff. Anybody wants to? Okay. Then we need to do a general public comment again. We will pass to general public comment. The commission has completed the discussion, and now we're gonna have a public comment. We ask members of the public to keep their comments to 1 minute in length and keep their comments focused on the draft document or anything that you wanna share with us. Please raise your hands. And I see that Babs raised her hand. Thank you, welcome again. Thank you for being here. You can go now.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I just want to say you all are amazing. Thank you so much. Your dedication, your determination, you set the bar really high for exemplary customer service. This is the 4th meeting I think that I have sat in on, and I applaud all your efforts and particularly everything that you came to tonight. I know you still have work ahead, but I also know you can all rise to whatever challenges lay ahead over the next few months. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Babs. Thank you for your comments. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, now we go to our next item and our agenda. And our next item in our agenda is phases of work and transition tasks.
Thank you. We'll make this quick because we know we're a bit over time here. There is no decision expected on any of this today, but we do take the opportunity to present sort of the draft work plan. A lot of the time when staff has done this, it's been very nebulous because there has not been a clear answer as to how long the commission has to work, and it's a lot of if then. Subsequent to the last time we did this, when we were in phase 3 preparing for the current phase 4, we now have clarity. So as we look through to the next phase of work, and obviously we're not done with this one yet, but the next phase of work is the transition plan and broader system phase. Subsequent to the revision of the agenda and scope, which what the commission did 2 weeks ago. This is what is in the agenda and scope that is required of you for the next phase, or what I should say, the commission self-assigned to this phase of work. So you can see that there's 3 kind of areas here. One of the categories is very small, name of the board and any other details. Second is how the broader system works in terms of which entities may need to be adjusted, how it relates to other parts of the city government and beyond that. As Commissioner Dan mentioned in the garden plot item, how does the new board relate to the DOJ and settlement agreement process? And then this last section is all about the different transition details and how over the course of 1 year at most after the final code package and settlement agreement amendments are approved by the city council, what will happen to get the new oversight board operational. So the agenda and scope also includes 3 defined outcome documents. One is an area of agreement on name and other details. One is an areas of agreement on the broader system. The other is the transition plan. And so the first draft of the transition plan and broader system phase flowchart, which we'll take member input on and revise and come back to you in a week or 2, is to have, it's a very similar one to what you've seen for all the previous phases. It's that there'd be a subcommittee on the transition plan. There'd be a subcommittee on the broader system. They both refer the documents up to the full commission, who would approve them in June. And then in parallel to that, there would be testimony and briefings at the full commission, subcommittee reports, et cetera. And that the full commission would create a short document with the names of the board, and if necessary, the staff entity as well. And then of course, there's the normal transition planning, which is what we're doing now, happening in that phase for the following phase. As with the previous 2 phases, the one we're currently in, phase 4 and the phase 3, more frequent subcommittees, meetings relative to the full commission compared to what came before. One outcome document per subcommittee. Subcommittees or the full PAC can receive briefings. The name and any revisions to previous documents would be done at the full commission, and of course, continuing to do community engagement. So I'm going to circle back to these preceding slides and just ask if there are any questions. And then if you have feedback, we'll definitely take it. We'll probably email out asking for that feedback just in the interest of time here. And then we'll circle back and talk about what the subcommittee should be at a later date.
Thank you, staff. And Commissioner Catherine has raised her hand.
So my question is, I know we're going to have a work plan or work meeting with the council, I think sometime in May. And to the extent that we want to rework any of our earlier documents or recommendations or so forth based on feedback, would we be doing it in the final phase, or would it need to be worked into this 5th phase?
A little bit of both, but primarily in the 5th. And that's actually what the revisions referred to here is, that the full commission could go back, because a subcommittee shouldn't really undo or change something that the full commission decided on. So if it's any previous document, that's something that would need to come back to the full commission. We'll certainly need to adjust the timeline if needed after we know exactly when the work session will be. And that's a potential opportunity for a preliminary presentation and feedback with City Council about the outcomes of phases 3 and 4 if it should happen. So yeah, to answer the question, yes, there'd need to be an opportunity for that, and we need to adjust the timeline once we have an idea of when that would be. And it probably couldn't all get done in this phase, because there'd also be additional community engagement, additional speaking to experts, affected parties, elected officials after that as well. And that would continue basically through the end. Does that answer the question, Co-Chair Catherine?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Catherine, and thank you, staff. Is there no more question? We can go to the next item on the agenda. Our staff, would you like to continue, or we can go to member curiosities?
No need to continue. Just one quick note on a separate topic while I have the floor, which is the definitions document that we skipped today. Please take an opportunity to read it over the next week or so and be familiar with it. The definitions of accountability and independent judgment have not yet been finalized by the commission, and those are pretty important to have a version, a commission approved working definition of accountability and of independent judgment. And that'll get worked out in a week or 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is member curiosities. Member curiosities is a brief period of time on today's agenda where members of commission can bring items to discuss. There might be questions or follow-ups or an article that you have read that you like to share. We're not going to vote on anything during this time. We want to give a space to multiple members to share. So please take a minute per person at most during this time. We will get suggestions and we will start asking if any member have questions and the process, or they like to have answers or ask questions. Are there any questions, additional comments? No? Okay. Then we'll now going to do the garden plot recap. This is time for facilitators, co-chairs, and the staff to summarize any items already brought up to date which didn't fit into today's agenda. We'll recap those items here and use them in developing future agendas. We won't be using this time to add new items not previously mentioned or to discuss any items, but we will use this list to develop future agendas so these items can be addressed. I will ask Dr. Moses if she can recap any garden plot.
I have two. I have one. The first one is tort claims results should be placed in the officer accountability document. And the second one is the DOJ report could not exist in the future, and that should be noted in the transition document. That's what I have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Moses. Co-chairs? Any item? No? Okay. Staff?
Same too as Dr. Moses. Thanks.
Thank you. Then I want to remind everyone that you can now submit advanced public comment to the Police Accountability Commission through web form, voicemail, or postal mail. Thank you to all the members today who attended. All the members attended today. That was amazing. And for your contributions. Thank you also for the interpreters for being here and staying here even if we were late, and you did a great job. And finally, thank you to all the members of the community for attending and contributing with your thoughts and questions. If you're not already signed for email updates, please also sign to receive updates from the PAC. The next meeting, and I know they may change for the Full Police Accountability Commission, is a week from today, but that may change. But I know we have a meeting. And let me see, I have some. Okay, and it is 9:19 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Good job.
Good night.